Today we have Mr. Robert Schubal today to discuss about poverty advocacy.
Hi, I'm Rob Schubal. I teach at Tyler Consolidated High School. I teach 12th grade civics.
All right, so your first question for today is, what would you consider to be poverty in your own words?
Poverty has a lot of definitions, but I think for me, poverty means the absolute minimum when it comes to finances, being able to provide for yourself and your family, both economically and financially. But poverty can mean several different things. For me, that's what poverty means.
All right. Have you ever been involved with anything regarding poverty-related issues? If yes, what is it?
Well, obviously, I have helped out at food banks and give to charities that definitely support groups that are homeless groups and hunger and all of these other charitable organizations. As for me, helping out, not so much, no.
What do you think are some strategies the government can perform to alleviate poverty?
Well, I do believe government has a role in facing this issue. And obviously through our welfare system, the Constitution clearly states that the government will watch out for the welfare and well-being of its citizenry. Now, does that mean there should be big abuses of the system? Absolutely not. But I think the government needs to do more when we look at our homeless issue. I think especially going through the pandemic, we need to be looking at health care for our most vulnerable, our most poverty-stricken individuals. There's several different things that the government can do in order to help alleviate the poverty of our country.
Do you believe the rich community is becoming richer and the poor community is becoming poorer?
Yes, I do. The wealth gap and the disparity between the 1% of individuals and the rest of us, yes, that gap is becoming larger and larger and larger. And what has really amplified it is the pandemic. Over the past 7 or 8 months, we've seen massive unemployment. We've seen people really struggling who had never really struggled before, but yet we see, top earnings coming out of Amazon and
Oh, the online shopping.
online
Yeah.
shopping. And I mean, so there are these industries that are doing quite well and individuals who are really reaping the benefits from that. What could our government do? Maybe some kind of taxation of those organizations and corporations. It's an idea.
Why do you think that most countries have a population in poverty?
That's a great question. I believe it's generational. Something that I know you have seen living here in Tyler County, that generation after generation, it's just that cycle of poverty that people can't seem to get out of. And I think a lot of countries deal with that. We've moved away from really the first world, third world kind of labels sociologically. So, I don't want to say, well, even in a first world, we have homelessness and poverty. It's everywhere. Every country deals with it. And so you have to wonder, is this a humanity issue versus really a governmental, social, kind of philosophical issue? Is this something to our core nature, our morals, humanity-wise?
So that brings me to the question, which country do you believe is in the most poverty right now?
Well, I would say probably India. India even though China, has a lot of good things going for it right now economically, their population is very much in poverty. Again, going back to the definition of not having the sufficient means financially and economically in order to survive, the bare minimum. We often have to look at Southwest Asian countries, African countries, even South American countries that are struggling. But I think we see a lot more of it in Southwest Asia.
What are your personal thoughts about welfare, and should the government fund the welfare system?
Yes, absolutely. We should fund the welfare system. I believe it needs to be a hand up and not a hand out. However, we do need to expand it. Times are tough. People are struggling, both with food insecurity and with health care, but also with having a roof over their head. I don't think the government has done enough when it comes to stepping in and talking about evictions. Many people were forced out of work because of the pandemic, so now we're seeing the repercussions of that, where people can't make the mortgage, they can't make the monthly rent, and they're being evicted. And as nicely as our governor has asked landlords not to evict people, that's not the reality. People are getting evicted, and I think the government really needs to come in with some sort of mandate to really take care of that.
What do you feel is more important than poverty in our country, and why?
That's another great question. Wow. I think poverty is like one of the most important issues we have, but obviously for me, education as well is a very important issue. We need good educators. We need strong educators, devoted educators. We need to pay our educators. And we need to, as a society, embrace education and kind of veer away from the anti-intellectual kind of rampant nature that we have going on in our country, where people are almost proud to be ignorant. I think we need to have kind of an awakening and an enlightenment where we stamp out anti-intellectualism and go forward with, trying to get back to the moon, and with innovations and research and development. And of all of the bad things that the pandemic has brought us, maybe this is a time where we can reawaken those kind of intellectual thoughts in the American populace.
So almost acting as a catalyst.
Yes, almost, kind of waking us up and saying, you know what, maybe it's time to do some research and development and pick up a book, and not be afraid of that. So, trust science again. I think these are things that will lead us out of poverty. Education could be that gateway for individuals.
Do you feel that inequality, discrimination, or disadvantaged backgrounds play a role towards receiving a well-paying career?
Yes, I do, because I have seen it firsthand, both racially, on a class level. Yes, I do believe this does affect what kind of job you're going to have. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? Absolutely, and I revel in the exceptions to the rule. However, I'd like to see, a playing field for everybody, where there will be equity and access for absolutely everybody.
What are some ways that we can effectively make people more aware of poverty?
Wow. I would suggest going to an Indian reservation, going to a Native American reservation. I would suggest going to really impoverished areas. Here in Appalachia, we see a lot of it. I invite people to come and look and reawaken the war on poverty that we had during the Johnson administration. Maybe it will wake people up, to what's going on. Go to the inner cities, go to the food banks, go to the soup kitchens and see what's going on there, and you will see the equity and access and how it is not there for everybody, that the American dream for some is still quite elusive.
So that brings me back to education. Would you think education brings a good first-hand view at
Yeah.
poverty, or a very bad description of it?
I think education brings, it's the great cleanser, it's the great disinfectant, and so as something as horrific as poverty is and how destructive it can be, education is the way out of poverty. Education is the way that we can start talking about, like you're doing, start talking about poverty and start seeing where the problem is and how to fix it. I really believe that it will be the gateway. It will be the cleanser that we need. You have known and seen your fellow classmates that come from very impoverished backgrounds, and one in particular that we're probably both thinking of, that came from a life of abuse and drug abuse background, and she worked so hard that she overcame and was able to overcome and hopefully break that cycle of poverty that we'll see, and her children will not have to deal with that. And could that happen to everybody? I think it could, and we just need to keep pushing and keep working.
Do you feel that some individuals never budget themselves, which then leads to them to believe they're struck with poverty?
Oh, yeah, I love the Bridesmaid movie when she wants first class and she's like, no, I'm poor. Does that happen to people? Absolutely. Do we need to do better in education when it comes to financial education, economic education? Absolutely. Look, I am all about the higher maths and sciences, but after Algebra 2, maybe a selection of financial literacy and banking and credit and these kinds of things that can really be infused into students before they leave public education. I think that might be that might do a lot to curb that kind of I've taken out a loan and I can't pay for it. that might help.
Yeah, definitely. I think throughout my education, I never really got that
Right.
that baseline right there.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know how to find limits, so
Yeah.
Yay!
Calculus.
Yay!
And our last question would be, would you suppose that affluent groups feel more entitled to share their wealth with poverty-filled societies?
I do. I think there are, you look at the Gates family and the Gates Foundation, like Bill and Melinda, and they truly don't have to ever work again, in their lives. They could just spend money on whatever. They choose not to. They choose to have a foundation that they are focusing on issues of poverty, issues that are going to affect those that are stricken with poverty, like climate change, like education. So they're focusing and using their money for good. Now, is that the rule? No, they are quite, I think, the exception. I think some people are willing to help to a point. Some people are willing just to write a check and say, there you go, I don't want to see it, I don't want to touch it. Some people who do have the money, they are affluent individuals, want to actually get out and help. They want to get out and engage with their community, as well as, writing a check. So, yeah, I would hope that more affluent people will help in any way that they can, whether it be financially or through their actions.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for being here,
problem.
Mr. Rob Schubal.
Thank you so
and
much.
thank you for so much for explaining poverty in a different view that I needed for my
Okay.
project.
Not a problem.
Yay!